Hello everybody. Welcome back to the MARZ live stream. Here again with virtual Corey. The real Corey is out enjoying the nice weather, so virtual Corey's here again. But anyways, I am here to continue on our Blender journey of exploring all of the modifiers and rating them from 1 to 10 on usefulness, at least in my case. Which ones I find to be the most useful, and the ones that are good to learn. So, yeah, we just continue from where we left off last week and go from there. So, let me switch our scene over here. There we go. Okay, hopefully you can hear me okay. I got everything set up right. For some reason, all of my unactive audio things came back and now I can't see my main one. Let me hide that and hide that and hide that. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Back in Blender again. Of course, we weren't actually working on a project, so or maybe we did have one. No, it doesn't look like it. That was from the 31st of March, so let's just start from scratch again. So I'm just going to delete my camera and my light because we aren't going to need those right now. And let's get back into our modifiers panel. So over here, of course, the little blue wrench and the drop down has all of our modifiers. So last week we went over all of the, well, most of the generate modifiers. Maybe we missed a few. I think we did miss a few. We talked about subsurface, which I rated as probably a 10 out of 10 as far as usefulness goes. But I think that was the last one we covered, actually. No, we did talk about triangulate, where it essentially, you can't really see it here, but turns your quads. So, you know, each one of these faces is a quad. You can, of course, change each of these into a triangle by dividing it in half this way. So that's what that one does. I think we talked about that. A volume to mesh. So this is an interesting one that the only time I've used it is with water. Strangely enough, doing like water particles. So I think that using a water volume, if I remember right, we should be able to actually make one real quick just to showcase this. There is like empty volumes. I don't find myself using them very often, but they are in Blender and people can do some really amazing things with them. The most I use volumes is like with volumetric lighting, which is just kind of a generic thing that applies to the whole scene. But if you were doing something like clouds and things like that, you can of course make them volumes. They're very intensive on your rendering, but still pretty cool. So I think that we can, what am I looking for here? Object, convert, not convert, quick effects. We want a quick liquid. So with this, I think, if I remember right, in order for this, so normally, oh, these are particles, obviously. Maybe it's a different setting. Liquid. But I believe, if I remember right, no, maybe I have this wrong. Somebody could probably correct me on this. I'm not huge into all the physics stuff, so I don't think I've ever really used that modifier then. Maybe I'm thinking of something different. There is a way you have to change this in order to, I think it's in our particle settings somewhere, if I can remember right. Oh, here we go. These are, so this menu here is the physics properties. So we'll talk a little bit more about this today because the rest of the modifiers are actually, well, most of them are well, some of them are physics modifiers. So as you can see, when I'm in this view, I have actually a particle system and a physics system. So there's a particle, this is in, and it will tell you, obviously, you can see here, that these settings are all in this menu, in the particle settings, and then this one is all the physics settings. So the neat thing with this is that if you have other things, other modifiers you want on top of this liquid, you can do that. I typically do it with other things, and I'll show you here in a second, but let's see if we can find, I forget where that is actually, oh, well, there's a checkbox for it. Okay, it's just mesh. So that's how you make it into something you can actually see when you render. It's got kind of a default shiny material on it. That quick effects is pretty cool if you're interested in that, but that's not exactly what I want to do. So it just takes the shape that you give it and turns that into a liquid, essentially. So the volume to mesh then is kind of a mystery to me. I think that you can actually, I thought maybe there was a way to do that, but I guess not. So bottom line is I don't know much about that one. Weld is the same way. I don't really know what this one does, to be quite honest with you. I would imagine it welds objects together, but maybe they need to be in the same thing. So you could probably explain these better, but that goes to show where I rank these, you know, how often I actually use them. And these both I barely ever use. So what if we apply this? Does this do anything? No? Okay. So somebody out there could probably explain weld better than I can, that's for sure. Either way, if I can't think of a use for them, probably starting out with Blender, you probably won't use them either. So let's go on to the deform ones. These are the interesting ones. So the first one, of course, is armature. So this is also a very high ranking modifier because you have to use it if you want to use armatures, bone skeletons with your mesh. So what this does is, if I have an armature here, which I'll go into this mode so you can see it. So here's a bone, right? Select the bone. So in order to get the bone to move the cube, you have to assign it an armature. You have to assign the cube an armature. So I can select the object, which in this case is the armature. You can pick a certain vertex group, but I rarely ever do that. The only checkbox in here I usually turn on is the preserve volume. But now you would think that if I go into pose mode that this would work, but it actually doesn't. So there's kind of a combination of things you have to have in order for this to work. One is the modifier, and the other is actually a vertex group that has the same name as this bone. So this bone is just, if we go into edit mode, we can see this bone is just called bone. We also have to make a vertex group for this cube that's named bone. And then in edit mode, we just have to assign everything to bone, and then go into pose mode, it will move with the bone. So this is typically how you want to animate stuff with a bone. So you can obviously animate objects without bones, but you know, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So you can see how this could be effective if, and I've done a lot of like rigging stuff on here, and you've probably seen me use the automatic weights. So that's how you get around having to do this all automatically. So if I go in and just delete this real quick, when you click a object and then shift click your armature and control P, you can parent that with automatic weights. And if I go back in here, you'll see that it re-added the armature modifier to this to the modifiers panel. So let's let me do a quick demo real quick. Let's make this cube. I'm going to edit it a little bit and make it kind of tall so I can show you. Add a few loop cuts, and then I'm just going to select it all and subdivide it. That should be fine. We could have probably just subdivided the whole thing, but so, and then with this, I'm going to go in edit mode, grab this end of the bone, bring it up, and then you can actually subdivide bones as well. Just a little handy tip. 4 is fine. So now we have 4 bones. So of course, if we were to go in pose mode, this should still move the whole thing because that's bone number, well, it's just bone. And then these other ones are bone number 2 and 3, and well, that one's 1 for some reason. 1, 3, 1, 1, 3, 2. I don't know why it named them that way when it subdivided it, but oh well. You could name these, you know, it could be your spine bones or whatever. But now if I go and redo this, you can just overwrite your automatic weights if you control P and parent again. And now if I go into pose mode and bend this cube, you can see that it has assigned it automatically based on it's a, you know, it's an area around the bone that it takes into account when it's assigning certain vertices. So you can see in here, if we go back to our thing again, just demo this, there's all the bones, and they each have their own vertex group. So perfect, did it all for us. Sometimes that doesn't work as well and you have to do stuff manually, but this is the quick way to do it. So what I wanted to show you with this though is a few more combinations of modifiers that we can use. So of course I like to use the preserve volume on here. Let's just show you how that works. So if I bend this, turn that on, you can see it just like preserves some of the volume like it says. Doesn't like compress there in the center where it's bending. So that's super useful. I don't know why it's not the default, honestly. Maybe if you're doing, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know. It's not the default, but either way. So I like to combine these. So a lot of times if you're doing this and you have a character and they have like a subdivision on them, you can actually typically, well, there we go. When you make your character, your subdivision, let me just add one, may be up here. And you can't really tell, it's pretty subtle on this. But if I move it, I actually prefer to put it below the armature so that it smooths everything out after you bend the bones. So you can get some really nice results where it's not, it's being smoothed after the fact. There's also a few other ones that we've seen in here, like the corrective smooth. Actually, we haven't got to those yet. Those are lower down on the deform list, but these kind of do the same thing as the subdivision surface, but they don't add any more geometry. So this is actually adding geometry. As you can see, you're subdividing it and then it's smoothing it. So I can bring this up further or bring it down. But these ones down here, the smooth corrective, and whatever that word is, I don't even want to try to pronounce it. Those are just a different type of smoothing. So we'll get to those here in a minute. So I'll leave that on because we're going to, I'll save this object here. So we'll be using this later. But let's go on to the next one. So what do we got here? Cast. So cast is a little bit weird. And again, I don't use this one very often because it gives you some really weird results. I haven't quite figured out all the little bits and pieces of it, but it can, if you're going for some really weird glitchy effects, you can definitely get that with this. There's probably more to it than I think there is, which is usually the case. But as you can see, if we just apply it to our shape, I don't really know what it's doing. Maybe if we had a different shape here. Let's do this with a new object. That way we maybe can see a little bit better what this is actually doing. So cast, might be hard to see with a sphere. No, Yeah, I'm not super familiar with this one either. As you can tell, there are quite a few in here that I don't know what they do because, well, all depends on how... Whoa, okay. That's pretty cool. It just needed some subdivisions. So if we add a subdivision surface, maybe I'll do this beforehand so it has more to work with and come up with some pretty cool shapes, actually. That's pretty neat. Oh, okay. Yeah. The usefulness of this is, you know, what you make of it, but, okay. I kind of see what it's trying to do. So you have, obviously, your different shapes, and you can kind of almost morph it into those other shapes. And you can do either, okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You can get some neat results out of that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Neat. Yeah, like I said, I don't use that one very often, but maybe I'll start using it because I haven't really messed with it, but it looks like a little top or something. But pretty cool. So that's cast in a nutshell. As much as I can explain, some of these are really simple, you know, there's not much to them. They do one little thing and that's about it. So that should give you kind of an idea what you can do with that one. Curve. So curve again. So there are sort of a different type of, they're not really shapes in Blender, they're more like, well, they're paths and there's curves. But they're things that you can use as kind of like guides for your objects. I added a Bezier curve here. And we'll see what we can get this to do. So if we select a curve object, and maybe give this a little bit more or something. So this sure looks like it's trying to, trying to follow this curve. That's what it looks like. I think that you can actually, maybe if this is the one I think it is, if we were to just go into edit mode here, look at the side, and select my vertices. I may have to like get it right where the, no? Looks like you can just take an object and have it follow the curve. Like if you had, say, a chain or something like that, it seems like that's the deal. So if we just subdivided this a bunch, I'm guessing if we modify this curve, we can have it sort of deform with it. Huh, interesting. Yeah, another one I don't use too often. But yeah, it looks like it just follows the curve of the curve. So I'm sure there's uses out there for it. But this is definitely probably a, I don't know, a 2 for me. But it's a deform one. So you're gonna, like most of these are gonna deform the mesh that you have. Pretty straightforward. So another one that we can look at, whoops, on this list here. I did not want to do that on that. I'm gonna actually get a plane for this one because this one is one that I actually use. And it's quite cool. So here's my plane. Now the deform or the displace modifier is pretty interesting. You have to give it a displacement map. So these are usually just black and white images that have different color values based from white to black and everywhere in between. And whatever those values are, you can displace a piece of geometry with those values. So nice thing about Blender is that it can generate these for us. So let's make one here. So what I just did was hit the new button and went into the texture area down here. And from this, the default for some reason is image or movie, but I guess most of the time you're bringing in your own images, but it does have some you can generate. So there's like the clouds. So let's start with that. So as you can see, this is a black and white image with you know, little splotches of clouds. But our thing here isn't doing anything. And the reason for that is that it actually needs geometry to displace. So it's not like if anybody knows what a normals map is, a normals map, it affects how the light bounces off the texture. With a displacement map, it actually changes the shape of the model itself. So you need that extra geometry. So this is actually something that's kind of changing a little bit in the game development world, where I've seen some folks taking normal maps and baking them into the mesh, because nowadays, particularly on engines like Unreal, they can support super high resolution, high resolution, meaning high like poly count objects, so a lot of faces and stuff, super well. So doing this isn't as taxing, but in the old days, and still a lot commonly practiced, that you use normal maps to displace anything. But I will show you, if we go into edit mode and we subdivide, it's not going to look like much yet. We subdivide. Of course, it's not going to do it. So let's just subdivide it that many times to see if it did anything. Well, it doesn't look like it did anything. So let's go back, edit mode, subdivide, subdivide, subdivide. Hey, there we go. So that is our map displayed, displacing this plane. Let me get rid of this curve over here. So if we go in here and we change this, say to distorted noise, we can get a different effect, or wood. So that's kind of cool. I like the where is it? There's the marble one, can be neat. You can get almost like a landscape. So you, of course, a lot of these have object or options down here, where you can change your settings. You can change the type depending on what you want. There's a whole bunch of different options in here. There's some pretty cool ones. So of course, the more dense your mesh is, the more you can actually see this texture. So if we subdivide again, I don't want to do this too many times, but we can start to get, if we smooth this, more and more kind of detailed results. So we can change the size. So maybe we want something that's actually kind of like a landscape, almost. Add more depth to it. A lot of these settings you just have to go in and play with, and you may find something interesting. And then of course in our displacement, we can turn the strength down if we want just like a nice subtle, and then adjust the mid-level so we can bring it back up kind of to ground level. And hey, that's not a bad terrain actually. Of course you can exaggerate that if you need more sharp mountains. You can also choose a direction to scale this in. So most of the time you probably just want it to be in Z, but Z and normal in this case are the same. So, but yeah, that's a displacement modifier. Definitely super useful. One cool thing you can do is there's actually real world displacement models of the Earth. And some of them you can pick a particular area and it will give you the height data from that area. So like, you know, obviously where the mountains are and where the water is and stuff. And you can put that into a displacement map and have the same like size, the same terrain as any place that you could think of. So it's a pretty cool effect. So if you're, you know, building a set that's from a specific place, you can actually go and find that height data out there from that location and just plug it into displacement modifier. So it's pretty cool. Definitely a useful one. So that one's a pretty solid 8. I don't use it a lot, but it definitely is part of my regular workflow. So let's see what's next. The hook. Let's get out a cube. Quite a few objects going this time, but I want to save some because we're going to need some for physics later on. I don't want this one though. So the hook modifier, this one is one that I don't really use too often, but I forget exactly. I think that it's a physics-based thing. If I remember right, let's just go in here real quick and add in a, I could have swore that was in there. Let's just add a rigid body for a second. No, I guess hook is not what I thought it was, unless I need to assign a vertex group, which I might. Oops. Let's just open this, and some of these do require you to actually have a vertex group in order for them to work. Like by default, they don't affect anything, kind of like the armature. So you may have to. Oh yeah, that did something. So yeah, it seems like it's just like. Oh, it's not just like that. It's doing something else that's weird. So it is like really stuck to that object. So if I play this again, I think I still have physics on it. Yeah, it doesn't have to do with physics. It's actually physically hooked to that object. So this one I definitely don't use very often either. It's a weird, really weird. I think that's just from the because I'm moving it away from the armature. It's not actually. So let's undo this and let's hook it to the terrain instead. Hook. Whoops. Hook and like that in the group. So it's almost like a constraint. There are definitely better ways to do this. I'm not sure what the benefit of using it in here is. I mean, the nice thing, the main thing I can think of is that you could have this with other modifiers, and there's also a strength setting. Interesting. Huh. Okay. I could definitely see how this could be useful. I haven't really used it, but I could see how this could be a useful modifier. But you can kind of see it's pretty simple. You just apply it and select an object you want it to be hooked to, and give it a make sure to give it a vertex group, and then it will follow it around. So it does what the name entails. So next is the one of the, oh, okay. So these are kind of similar in a way. I haven't really used this one. So I'm not entirely sure what it does compared to the other. So the other one is actually you use, I haven't done this in a while, to remember which, it's a lattice. Yeah, so this one requires a different object that I don't really teach much. But this is a lattice. So a lattice is a type of, a way to deform an object. Quite interestingly, but you know, most of the time I just use an armature, but this is another option. And these can be edited just like anything. I can subdivide them. I thought you could subdivide them. Maybe it's in their settings. Yeah, they have a special setting, so you have to go in here and let's give this some subdivisions. There we go. Okay. So the lattice, let me go back in here. I thought this was similar, but I don't think it is. I really don't know this one, and I'm not sure exactly what to do with it. So let's just skip to the lattice, because that is, I think it has a similar result, but with this, we just select our lattice object, assign that vertex group, and now if we go in and we edit the lattice, it will change the cube. So let's just to make this a little bit more interesting, I'm going to subdivide it a few times. Okay, and now go into edit mode. I can move things with the lattice. So this is pretty cool. And then you can actually have, if you wanted to, have the lattice attached to an armature, and you could get some really smooth results out of your animations. So, and as you can see, there's actually a center one as well. So it's quite cool. I really don't find myself using them very often. I wonder if is there a way to reset everything? I don't think so. Unless it's a hotkey. Maybe it's in the... But you see there's a few... So you can do all the same stuff pretty much. You can have vertex groups, you can have shape keys on these. So you could use this as... like if you wanted to do really smooth like facial animations, you could have a lattice modifier over the face. The only problem, the main thing why I don't use these is because you can't really, unless you're animating in Blender and doing everything in Blender, they don't really export. So you can't use it in a game engine. You can't, move it to another software. It's sort of stuck with just being a Blender thing. So if you're working in any kind of pipeline, moving things around, it's not really the best option, and it's really not an option at all. I don't think it will work for you. I don't know any other software you could just like import this into. I haven't seen it work, but it may work. Like I said, I've used them a little bit, but less and less nowadays, mostly just sticking to using armatures because that's what's supported in other platforms. So I think that's a good thing to learn. So mesh deform now is very similar, but let's do this with a cube. It's just using a mesh instead of, I'll just lock this too. That doesn't do what I want it to do. It's very similar, but of course now I can see, there we go. Use an object instead of a, use an object instead of a lattice. So the lattice is nice because you don't have to do this binding thing, but it's because you have to bind this. Hopefully it doesn't crash. Okay, good. But now if I move this, you can see that shape is bound to this. So it makes it a lot simpler to modify stuff. So, oh, it's because I got the snapping on. You can see how this could be pretty cool though. You could use it to create some really interesting shapes. And if you wanted to, you can actually, I think you could probably hide this shape. And then use and just render the inside shape, which would be neat. So some cool stuff with that one. Have used that a little bit before, but like I said, these things don't export well. So, I would, practice using them sparingly because they're, you're not going to be able to use them in anything else unless you're just working in Blender. So, next is a cool one though. The shrink wrap modifier does exactly what you think it would do. Let's shrink wrap our little rigged character thingy over here. So I've got this, typically this is used with clothes. So you could, shrink wrap a shirt to a character or something. Let's go in our see-through view, make sure we got it all in there. So you want to make sure that your object is completely around your character or whatever it might be. And I'm just gonna actually apply the subdivision and then go in and add the shrink wrap, and you select your target. So my target's going to be the cube, and right away you can see how fast it did it. It's kind of well, shrink wrapped around. Shade that smooth. Hard to see, but it's a little bit glitchy like that, so that's why there's this offset. You can do a very small offset, maybe a little bit more so I don't get that glitchiness there, but you get this result that's like shrink wrap. So you can see how fast that was. So, and it is actually real time too, as long as you don't go out of the bounds of the object that you are shrink wrapped to. If I go into pose mode and I bend this, it's going to like live shrink wrap it around the object. It's a little bit glitchy. I don't know if I would actually use this in a production, but you may want to like bring this offset even further out just so you don't get any overlap. But you could put like a clear plastic texture on this and it would look pretty cool. You can also like subdivide it afterwards or smooth it. So actually, since we're getting there, that's the next ones. I'm going to skip simple deform for a second and just show you the smooth, because what you can do with this is if you have this lattice or this shrink wrap over the top of another object and you didn't like this kind of rough, like where it's kind of stretched here, you can use that smooth modifier to smooth it out, though it doesn't look great. And repeating this is, you just gotta make sure that the factor is not too high. Repeating it helps a little bit, so that's better. Go in and actually, for this thing, I can set this to viewport. Where's that? There it is. Viewport display in front. That way I don't have to keep switching to see-through. There we go. So now if I move this in pose mode, still pretty good timing, but you could make it like, I don't know, it's like it's inside a pillowcase or something. But it's pretty cool. You definitely get some neat results off of this, especially if you put a see-through texture on it. That would be pretty neat. So that's what the smooth does. They all kind of do the same thing, all of these smooths. The corrective smooth, I actually tend to use this one more. Has a few more options. Probably don't need to repeat it 5 times, but, and it doesn't seem, to me it doesn't seem like it does that weird glitchy thing if you did go too far with it. You can get adjust some scaling. And yeah, I think that one looks a lot better, honestly. And you still get your poses and stuff. It's kind of clipping through it a little bit. Probably want to, since we're smoothing this, I would adjust the shrink wrap and bring it out a little bit again. And then just keep that factor not too high, that way we don't get the clipping. Pretty cool. So you could animate with this. It doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit, it pops in and out a little bit, but it's not too shabby. So that is the corrective smooth and the shrink wrap modifier. Now the simple deform. I need another mesh again. How are we doing on time? 5:40. Okay. So with the simple deform, as you can see, it's a very simple deform, and it really just does what it says, and you can twist and turn things and make some pretty cool shapes. So of course, let me select this and scale it out. And kind of get like a, this one's really cool for architectural stuff. Can also bend things. If we bend it this way. Nope, not on the Y, we want on the Z, there we go. we can create sort of an arch shape. I use this one sometimes, but I find myself actually modeling this stuff more often, but this is a super, well, a simple way to deform things. You can set some restrictions. We can do a taper. So if you need like the roof of a house or something, or like this should kind of give us like a column shape, we can scale this properly. We get kind of a column looking thing. So, and then stretch kind of just scales it, but keeps the volume. I think twist is pretty cool because you can actually, you know, get, if we had a proper amount of vertices here, you can get some really neat looking shapes. If you're making like, I don't know, a drill bit or a screw or something, do that. Probably for this, I'd want to use my auto smooth. Yeah, there we go. Auto smooth just, it won't, you can tell it the percentage of things to smooth, and everything higher than that will not be smoothed. So the sharp edges stay. So that's why now all of these sharp edges are not smooth, but the rest of it is. So this doesn't look quite right in the shading, but this helps it a lot. So that's a pretty cool one. Pretty straightforward, definitely useful. I've used it a few times. Like I said, I put it in a solid 6. It's not below that threshold of like, I don't even know what this is for, but it's definitely something that you can use a lot if you are doing this kind of stuff. So let's see, then we have, so we did surface, or surface deform. Why was it called simple deform? Surface deform. Then we have warp. Warp is, let's put warp on here. We have to warp to an object, or from an object. Oops. Can't warp from ourselves. We'll warp from that to this, and oh, the sphere still has is still a rigid body. Turn that off for a second. I'm not actually sure. I must be missing something with this one. I don't typically use this either. Strength didn't seem to do anything. Texture fall off. Oh, well, look at that. We probably need a vertex group. When in doubt, add a vertex group. Assign. Go back to modifier, select our group, and then I must be doing this one wrong. I'm not sure. I think the way you can do with this one is, let's get to identical objects, if I remember right, and maybe just like scale this one up. I think we may need one more. I thought that you could warp from, like, almost like shape shift kind of thing. So if we warp from that to that, but I honestly don't know how to make it go. So this one I'm kind of at a loss for. There's probably a way. Probably more setup to it than what I'm thinking it is. Edit mode, assign, and warp group, play, no. Huh, interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. Ooh, yeah, no, I didn't do anything. I'm not sure what the deal with this one is, to be quite honest. I don't use it. So I'd say I give that one probably, I don't know. If it's not easy enough to figure out, usually if there's a bunch of setup, you know, Probably gonna give it a 2. There's probably a really cool thing you can do with it, but goes to show, just another one I don't use. So let's go on to the next one. The next one is Wave. So Wave, been getting pretty familiar with because it is Corey's favorite. Wave is actually an animation thing. That's why I kept playing, because I was thinking maybe it was like Wave. But Wave does some pretty cool stuff. So if I hit play here, you can see things are waving. So basically there's a bunch of different settings in here that you can kind of make into animation. So you can play around with these settings and come up with some pretty cool effects. So you could do something like that's an actual flag if you wanted it to wave, or like waves in the water. If this was water here, we could probably put waves on it. Oh, okay. Calm down there. But this is a pretty fun one. You get some like instant results. Kind of looks like fabric. Okay, so width is the speed. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Can also do this along the normals, which creates some pretty crazy results. So yeah, this one's pretty cool. Definitely used it a few times. It's a little bit unwieldy, but hey, there's some... That's starting to look kind of like waves. It's too fast though. Not sure how to actually slow it down. I think we can probably offset it. Oh, okay, there's some dampening. Speed, obviously. Do it. Slowed it down too much. Yeah, look at that. That's kind of like a soft waves. You could probably do that on a flat plane and look better, but I could pass as water if it had a proper texture on it. Whoa. They can definitely get some really cool results off of this. So definitely recommend playing around with Wave. It's a pretty fun one. It's like some instant results without too much work. So just playing around the settings and you can get some cool stuff. So I don't want to apply that. I don't even know what that would do. We got a few minutes left. Let me take the wave off so things stop moving around. But I wanted to real quick, since the physics are all underneath this category too, talk a little bit about physics. Now, there's a lot that you can get into. They're pretty complicated. I'm actually hoping that they'll eventually update the physics stuff in Blender because I feel like it's getting a little bit dated. Some of the tools just like don't quite work the way you think. Excuse me. But I will show you some things. Let's make ourselves a floor. I'm gonna move our little dude over here. I'm just gonna add in a cube, and hey, you know what? We're using modifiers. Why don't I use a modifier? I'm just gonna bevel it. Bevel. Maybe twice. Give it some nice edges. Scale it up. I'm gonna make sure that I apply my scale. So that's one thing with physics, is make sure you apply your, particularly your scale, because that can mess with things. So let's start with the simplest to understand, and that is the cloth physics. So if you go in here, that is the top one. We can add it here. Whoops, not that one. We're gonna need that one later. We can add it here, but you can see it says these settings are in the physics tab. So just like we saw before, there's a physics tab. But if we were to play this, yeah, that's not very exciting. So we need some collision on the cube here. So let's add collision. So that was under that drop down too. And now if we play this, oh wow, we got a flat piece of fabric. Let's put collision on our floor as well while we're at it. Play this, or return this. So of course, just kind of like with the displace modifier, the cloth needs more vertices to work with. So let's just go into edit mode, subdivide. You can actually come down here to this little pop-up and subdivide a certain number of times. It's actually only 10, so probably going to need more than that. So right click, subdivide again. And let's go. Hopefully I don't crash the computer with that. So now if I press play, simulate through, and we have cloth. So it did this because, well, I don't think that I applied my scale to my plane here. So we can check. Yep, I did not. So object, apply scale. Now if we play, sometimes if, yeah, so one thing to note too is your face orientation. So you see how this is all red. So it thinks that the inside, or it's like inside out. We can just recalculate the outside, and that should hopefully help us. Let us see. Yes, much better. Cool. We can turn that off. So this is pretty much just the basics so far of physics. This is the cloth physics, obviously. There's a bunch of different settings in here, a bunch. So you kind of have to explore them on your own time. So maybe I'll do a video at some point going through, but there are some really great YouTube videos that you can watch too that will like really get into depth on what each one of these settings does. But they, for starting, there's actually presets up here. So cloth presets, you can change the type of fabric. So let's go for leather, try that out, see how different it looks. It's a little bit laggier because it upped the quality quite a bit. But as you can see, leather is a lot stiffer than the default, which I think is cotton. Yeah. So if we can shade this smooth. One thing I also like to do with this is bring in our corrective smooth again. And there's still some pretty harsh edges, but mostly that's because the cloth is not colliding with itself. So that's one setting that I also like to turn on, and that's, I mean, you can do more, of course, but so self collision, underneath collision, take a little bit longer to load, but it won't clip into itself now. So get a lot nicer results. So it's still kind of like clipping through the cube here. We just have to go into our smooth, and you can change the, oh, interesting. Well, maybe the regular smooth will work better for us. Let's see. Still clipping through. Probably have to do some finer adjustments, but kind of get the idea. Typically you'd want, you'd have a separate collision box for cubes and stuff like that. Or you could actually pin certain areas of fabric. So just to show you that real quick with the time we have left, you can go into edit mode and select an edge, go into your vertex groups, assign group, and then, so if you're making a flag or something, you could do it this way. Go into your physics settings, and cloth, find, I believe it's in shape, you have pin group to group pin thing, and then if we play, it's gonna hold on to it right there, which is exactly what you want, and then it's kind of gonna fall over, drape over the cube, and look really nice. So yeah, that is the cloth physics. I'm going to real quick show you, let's just delete this one so we're not thinking about it. We'll use this cube. The other one I used earlier was the rigid body, which is for some reason not in the modifiers. Not sure why, but just to show you real quick, rigid body is what it sounds like. It's a rigid body. So weird thing about this is that collision doesn't always work. You need to also have this be a rigid body, but if you make it passive, it will not fall. So when your cube falls, it will fall on and hit the surface. There we go. Pretty nice. There's also soft body, which is very similar to rigid body, though it is, well, kind of the opposite. There's actually, by default, it pins it, so we can turn off goal and then it won't stay there. The weird thing is that this needs a collision. So most of the time, if you have you know, a surface that is both colliding with cloths physics and rigid body physics, might as well put both on there. You can have more than one, as you can see. And now, well, our cube just kind of falls apart. But if I add some, well, probably want self-collision, and also, where's the other setting? So of course, soft body has equally as many settings as the cloth does. What am I looking for? Edge. Actually, don't find myself using soft bodies as much because you can actually use, there we go. As you can see, very jiggly cube. That's the stiffness. So that sort of holds it together, gives it some rigidness. So that's super fun. You can do some cool stuff with that. You've probably seen videos online of people making like a whole bunch of different objects all colliding with each other, physics like that. So of course you can, you know, duplicate these. I think that they do collide with each other by default. No, they don't. So you probably have to do collision, collision, and collision. Whoa, okay, that didn't work as well as I thought. I think they probably need, I think there was, oh, I did turn on self-collision on here. Like I said, the physics engine in Blender, people can do some really amazing things, but I have not been able to really wrangle it in where it works as good as I want it to, in the way you think it would. So, but anyways, gives you sort of an idea of that. We don't have too many more minutes left, so I think the last one is we looked at fluid a little bit. Showed you how to set up a quick fluid thing. The rest of them, dynamic paint, that's used for like if you're doing snow or something, you can have it dynamically like change based on, you know, if you run a cube through it or something, or character's footsteps or whatever. And then you have the force fields, which is a whole nother thing, and they're not modifiers though, so we don't need to talk about them. There's also particle systems in here, of course. So that's stuff like hair, although there's a new hair engine, and using geometry nodes. So really the old particle system is not really used for hair anymore, but it's there. You can also, you know, obviously do things like snow and rain and whatnot. Particle instance is like a copy of another particle system, which is pretty cool. Also do oceans. You can like generate an ocean. You just click it and it's an ocean. I think there's a way to generate, have waves, I thought. Do foam and spray and all sorts of stuff, but I don't know where we have to bake the ocean. I don't know, but we are out of time, so I'm gonna leave. Hope you found some of that useful. Definitely ask me questions if you have any concerns about modifiers. Yeah, cool. Well, thanks to all y'all who hung out for this, and we will see you next week. Same time, same place, same everything. All right, take it easy. See you next time.